The year was 2015, the event was EVO, and the hype was at an all-time high for Street Fighter. Fans were excitedly waiting for the finals of the red-hot Ultra Street Fighter 4 to play out, and Capcom chose the perfect time to surge energy even further with a trailer for one of the brand new characters coming to the launch roster of Street Fighter 5. The big screen proceeded to show off an ancient Aztec warrior with battle scars all over his body and massive dreadlocks for hair. The volume in the ballroom escalated each time this character ripped into a new special as we watched him uppercut, dive kick, command grab, and slash the living crap out of Ken Masters. Just when we thought it couldn't get any better, the fighter activated what looked like Super Saiyan mode as his hair exploded into a giant glowing sea anemone, and he then proceeded to rifle off even more devastating attacks. This was our introduction to Necalli, perhaps Street Fighter V's most promising newcomer. He immediately had tons of fans on his side as his debut trailer checked all the right boxes, and breadcrumbs of additional information that came out in the coming weeks and months led audiences to speculate about how he'd fit into the overall Street Fighter puzzle. Indeed, Necalli had just about everything going for him, but a few months after the game dropped, so did almost all favor for the newcomer. The number of players using him suddenly started to dwindle, and by about the end of Season 2, Necalli was all but a joke in Street Fighter V. So how did such an initially well-designed Street Fighter villain fall flat on his face? Well, there are a few reasons. Fighting game characters can get wonky and crazy and pretty out there when it comes to goals, personality tics, and defining traits, but as long as players can make enough sense out of these, they can invest in the character and begin to care about them. It matters if the character moves toward their goal in some significant way or runs into another fighter they particularly hate or love because, well, the audience perceives there's a story unfolding in front of them that's worth listening to. Capcom definitely injected Necalli with the beginnings of such a personality as he was introduced as a mysterious ancient Aztec warrior who served a particular role as an emissary of the gods. His specific mission was to consume the souls of Earth's strongest warriors, and we learn that he's an entity who appears every few hundred years to do his dark work. This patterned emergence of darkness is an excellent, tried and true setup that we've seen in such examples as Pennywise in Stephen King's It or Ganondorf in the Legend of Zelda series. The facts that Necalli was thousands of years old and that he wielded some mysterious, unnamed power meant that he could connect to the past in ways that most other characters couldn't, and suppositions that we might start hearing about the origins of one of Street Fighter's prominent dark energies, either the Satsui no Hado or Psycho Power, naturally emerged. Also, the aforementioned badass moves we saw Necalli perform in his trailer had names like Mask of Tlali and The Disc's Guidance and Valiant Rebellion that implied a more specific origin story for a more fleshed out character. Perhaps Necalli was some part of a rebellious uprising in his community and he used some heavenly disc-shaped body to navigate his way to an artifact that unleashed an evil power that gave him the ability to vanquish his foes, but also locked him into a curse where he'd have to serve as the eternal soul-consuming emissary of the gods. The pieces are all right there in front of us, but Capcom never really put them together. We never got any elaboration on Necalli's backstory. He was always just the conceptual force of primal battle and was never refined into an actual person we could relate to and therefore care about. Once we learned that he wanted to devour our strong souls, well, we pretty much knew everything we were going to learn about Necalli. Okay, so swing and a miss on the relatability front, but maybe Necalli could still thrive as a worthy new adversary to Street Fighter's Team Good Guys. Necalli's face, for instance, featured a prominent V scar that aligned with the game's V theming. Indeed, in the final sequences of both the opening cinematic and the CG trailer, the camera hones in on Necalli's face and highlights the V as it morphs into the SF5 logo and then title screen. This character truly seemed to be a focal point, if not the main focal point of the game, and given his high-stakes nature of being a soul-consuming ambassador from the gods, it appeared as though he'd be the new big bad. When Street Fighter V was rushed to shelves in February of 2016, it was infamously incomplete as various integral parts of the experience, such as the main story, were not yet accessible. Fans would have to wait a few more months for most answers, but each character did have a smaller individual story mode that briefly told a bit of their respective tales before the events of Street Fighter V. Necalli's is narrated by an Aztec character named the Warrior Prophet, who prophesies that the character is about to awaken again and that he'll feast on the souls of Ryu, Dalsim, and M. Bison. This instantly made Necalli even more formidable as he took out the best of both the good and the bad guys without breaking a sweat. Plus, we got to see how he assimilates victims by turning his arms into sand-like substance and enveloping them entirely. How was anyone going to fight this? Would the good guys and the bad guys have to team up? Necalli's pre-story even ends with his killing and consuming the warrior prophet himself, leaving us effectively terrified of and intrigued by this seemingly unstoppable rebel force. Then the main story came out. 4.5 months after Street Fighter V's release, we got its cinematic story mode, A Shadow Falls. Necalli appears in the very first scene as Charlie Nash passes through a dream as he awakens from death.
Devour. The soul wanders. I must devour.
What in the hell are you?
Devour.
Okay, so pretty cool, pretty scary, but why the sheep? Not sure if this is a metaphor or it's just the fact that Nash wakes up next to a stage that has sheep in it. The butterfly does come back later, but has virtually nothing to do with Nash. In fact, he and Necalli never end up fighting. A few seconds after Nash wakes up, a ghost of M. Bison appears, which makes a ton more sense for the situation as Nash's story is wholly tethered to the evil dictator. It's almost as if Capcom was like, here's the actual setup for the story, but we also have this other character that we want to feel like an antagonist, so we'll inexplicably force him into the situation with a quick dream sequence too. Necalli then appears promptly again in Act 1 Scene 2 as Dalsim and Ryu are training in India. He takes on Ryu and knocks him down, which prompts the poster boy to start tapping into the Satsui no Hado, which Dalsim puts the kibosh on before it can get started. Sim then proceeds to fight Necalli and beat him back, prompting him to retreat by melting into a puddle of liquid and evaporating. You know, like an intimidating villain that's to be feared by all. After this, Necalli doesn't appear again until the middle of Act 4. There are 5 acts in total, by the way, wherein he randomly appears again in M. Bison's lair just after the actual big boss of the game has endured a hard-fought battle with Nash. Even with this cheap money-in-the-bank approach, Necalli gets handled by M. Bison and ends up on his back. Our soul-devouring stutterer gets up for round 2, but Fong appears and pokes him, prompting him to once again resort to his main special move, melt into a puddle and evaporate. He navigates to another room in the base where Nash and Rashid are and decides to chase them, but they get away. Necalli makes his final appearance in A Shadow Falls just a few scenes later when he appears to and fights Ryu at the Kanzuki residence. They have a fairly cool face-off, but then Ryu figures out how to effectively use the power of nothingness, represented by that butterfly from earlier, and beats Necalli back with a single punch. Dalsim appears to talk some smack to Necalli, and our fearsome and unstoppable god-fueled force of battle incarnate pulls off one last EX melt into a puddle and evaporate, and leaves the story for good. That's right, he's out of the story before the climax. Instead of being an integral part of this portion of Street Fighter lore, Necalli wound up being less than a side character. I say less because you could completely cut out all of his scenes save for the last and it'd have zero impact on the story. And even then, it wouldn't be too hard to have Ryu find his way to mastery and balance through some other vehicle or final test. Necalli would go on to appear in 2 other story snippets from later DLC characters Balrog and Akuma, but continues his trend of being a jobber in both. He appears in Balrog's story as a mere interruption to a business conversation between the boxer and Urien. Urien sees Necalli as an opportunity to test Balrog to see if he's worth hiring, and so Rog proceeds to prove himself with little effort and then goes back to the conversation. When Necalli appears to Akuma, he loses but then goes for a sneak assimilation attack a la Majin Buu. This initially works, but a pregnant-looking Necalli quickly thereafter explodes as Akuma simply bursts his way out of the beast, a la Agent K. Fighting game lore is rarely top-tier storytelling and has a reputation as such, but Necalli stands as a clear example of how important and impressing it actually is. These characters don't have to be as intricate and multidimensional as Dostoevsky's Raskolnikov or Cervantes' Don Quixote, but if they're shown in a way that players can't respect or relate to, what chance do they have of garnering any kind of charisma? As I mentioned earlier, Street Fighter V was rushed to release with many aspects of it still incomplete, and I think Necalli's development was one of the victims of this decision. What started as an intriguing new thread to be woven into the greater Street Fighter tapestry with thoughtfulness and clear intent was halted early in the process. His interesting initial points were never connected, and his role seems to have been relegated down from whatever it was to all but inconsequential jobber. And that's unfortunate because it looks like we almost had a new Street Fighter mainstay, but now after such a fail, it's not all that likely we'll ever see Necalli again. Do you think Capcom should try to bring the character back at some point, this time giving him the time and care he needs? Or is Necalli forever destined to be a tragic loser-oozer? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you were entertained or informed, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. I've been John Velociraptor Guerrero for EventHubs. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.